Welcome to today's greenhouse chat, and this topic is so good once again. 5 unexpected ways that gardening changes your life and is more than just growing plants. I am in love with these greenhouse chats because I feel like it is allowing us to open up this dialogue that many of us have been hoping for, or we're talking about things that a lot of us really feel so strongly and deeply about. And so the responses have been amazing. People are reaching out with wonderful personal stories about how gardening got them through a tough time, grief and depression or loss, just the strong ties that we have to gardening and the way it affects us as human beings. It has been amazing. Hi, you guys. This is Nicole from My Carolina Garden. My garden is located in growing zone 8B, and I am in Southeastern North Carolina. So let us jump into the 5 ways that gardening can change our lives, unexpectedly or otherwise. Number 1, this one is so important. Gardening changes your relationship with time. In a world, society that we want everything instantaneously, we want items to get shipped to us as quickly as possible. We want our downloads to happen instantaneously. The moment we want something, boom, 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 it better be there for us. Gardening forces us to slow down, and it teaches us patience like nothing else does. So some ways in which this idea is life-changing. It gets you thinking in seasons instead of in seconds. Think about that, really. You realize that good things take time to come to you, and when they do, the reward is so much sweeter. And also, you learn that small actions that we take over time end up adding up to huge results. Planting seeds now, or even picking weeds now, or planting just a couple of items now, all add up to a beautiful result when things come together. One little personal story from me talking about patience. I bought a whole bunch of evergreen trees to plant behind my fence line. And the idea was I really wanted to break up the sight lines on my property so I didn't just see other houses in my neighborhood. Well, when you're buying a whole bunch of things, especially trees that are a little bit more pricey, you tend to buy them smaller so you can afford to do this. So I had bought 15 trees. They were $50 each. That was like a decent price tag, all things considered, but they were much shorter than my 6-foot fence. So I had to wait for these evergreen trees, Leland cypress, to start growing up over the fence line. Now, of course, I am looking at the trees with the fence in the middle. So until the trees get taller than 6 feet, I can't even barely tell that there are trees back there. Once that growth started happening and that green started showing up over the 6-foot fence, I was like, yes, the reward was awesome. And now, years later, when I have tremendous growth over my fence line and I really have the privacy I had been seeking, oh my gosh, yeah, waiting and getting the reward is so much sweeter. Of course, trees are a fairly easy example. Have you ever planted something in the ground and you're watering it and you kind of just feel like you're watering dirt for a while until finally you see these little signs of green peeking up through the ground and you're like, yes, what you planted is now growing and it feels awesome. Gardening actually rewires your brain so that you can appreciate this slow, steady process. A second way gardening changes your life is because gardening connects you to something bigger. When you garden, you stop seeing plants as decor and you start to see how everything is connected. So how does this change your life? You realize your garden isn't just about you. It's about a whole ecosystem. You start noticing pollinators, changes in the soil, weather patterns, seasonal cycles, and you feel a deeper connection to nature even in your backyard garden. In the abstract, it's easy to think of butterflies, bees, the pollinators being attracted to our plants and things like that. Maybe our minds even go back to elementary school science class when they tell us about pollen and all the different things. Well, that can be true. You can have knowledge from your past, but as you start to experience new things in your garden firsthand, seeing like what kinds of plants attract certain pollinators, for example, things become even more fascinating. Something interesting that happened to me this past summer, I was gardening and I could hear my tree just buzzing with thousands of bees. And it did not startle me because I actually have my friends and neighbors down the street. They are beekeepers, and I knew that they had multiple hives on their property, but the first thing I thought of was, oh no, like, did their hive leave their property and come to mine? So I called them right up and I said, hey, can you come and see if these are your bees? Well, it turns out they were not their bees. And instead of just being like honeybees, there were all sorts of things like wasps and yeah, I don't even know all the things that were in this tree that I have, which is called an Eastern Baccharis actually, and it's more of a wetland weed, if you will, that happened upon my property because we're surrounded by wetlands here. And I kept it, and it turns out it's a tremendous pollinator attractor. That to me was mind-blowing and awesome because I knew I had something that attracted pollinators in such a big way. Once you start seeing how everything is connected, it truly changes the way you interact with your space. You start gardening with intention, knowing that even the small changes that you're making on your maybe small plot of land actually makes a big difference in the grand world of nature. Even composting can be seen as something different because now you're seeing your food scraps as food for your soil, and you realize, like, let's not waste these food scraps when it can really provide these nutrients to our soil, therefore our plants and trees, and everything is just like, oh my gosh, I want to do all of it. Number 3, gardening changes the way you see beauty. We're used to seeing beauty as perfection. Perfect flower blooms, Pinterest perfect gardens, perfectly straight lines, perfect symmetry where we want it. But gardening teaches you to see beauty differently. One of my little personal anecdotes about this is I have a lot of blanket flowers on my property, a lot. Now, it's not really unusual or hard to imagine because I live in coastal North Carolina, so I live right near the beach, and I see blanket flowers growing wild on the beach or near the beach all the time. You can even see them growing in sandy patches right along the highway and all sorts of things. So blanket flowers grow and spread prolifically in my garden. Well, not that long ago, I had a whole section of my blanket flowers that came up, dare I say, imperfectly. The flower blooms were unusual, almost looked deformed in a way. And I sat there looking at it, and instead of thinking, well, gee, why don't you look perfect? I don't like you anymore. I became interested in what the story could have been with this blanket flower. What happened to it? What had it gone through to have its flower blooms look the unusual way that they did? The result of that was that I was more in awe with these flowers because of their unusual blooms than I was upset that they weren't perfect looking. So the way that seeing beauty in a different way through gardening can change our lives, we stop looking for things to be perfect and we appreciate those imperfections. We appreciate the fact that a garden is ever changing. This is something we want anyway, so I feel like when we embrace the fact that it's ever changing, it makes us feel a lot more comfortable with the fact that that happens. And of course, in that way, we start to value growth, texture, and natural beauty over this kind of unnatural perfect order. Gardening shifts your mindset from perfect to alive. And when you really grasp that concept, it filters into other aspects of your life as well. A fourth way that gardening changes your life that you may not have even thought of is that gardening makes you more resilient. So what do I mean by that? If you garden for long enough, one thing is for sure, something will go wrong. Plants will die, pests will come and wipe out some of your beautiful babies, or maybe a storm will destroy your flower. These things, unfortunately, are inevitable. We have to then deal with these things after the storm has passed. We have to figure out how to fix our crops once the pests have been there and wreak the havoc that they did. So how this resiliency is life-changing. You learn to bounce back from these setbacks. You learn that failure is a part of growth. And almost most importantly, you become less afraid to try again because you realize that these types of things are all a part of gardening and life. A personal example of when pests really affected my garden. Last summer, I had leaf rollers, a major infestation on my canna lilies. If you know my garden, it's extremely tropical, and I have a lot of different varieties of canna lilies, and they're one of my prized possessions. I just love them. I hadn't had a leaf roller problem before, and then last year, they're like caterpillar worms basically that start eating through your leaves, cause major damage to your foliage. And if you're not familiar with canna lilies, you have them in part because of the colorful blooms that they have, but the other part is their gorgeous foliage. So these leaf rollers literally wreck the integrity of the plant. But instead of losing my love for the canna lilies or deciding they were just too much work and I was going to get rid of them all, I cut off the problems, the leaves that I had to, the foliage that I had to. I got rid of the leaf rollers that I could. I hadn't yet found a permanent solution to my problem, but I have vowed that I will find that solution this year so I can let you know as well, so we don't have to have this problem on our gorgeous flowers, which for many of us means these flowers extend throughout our whole garden space. So it's really an overwhelming problem to have. It takes determination and grit and resilience to tackle a large gardening problem. But once you do that, feel proud of yourself, because it's that grit and determination that carries on into other parts of your life. And number 5 really ties into number 4. The way that we improve our problem-solving skill. That is another life lesson that we can learn from gardening. Some ways that it changes our life is we get more resourceful when we're faced head-on with problems, and we know, for example, we're not letting those leaf rollers destroy our flowers anymore, or we're not letting those aphids chew up all of our flower blooms anymore. And you start to see these challenges as puzzles that you can solve instead of roadblocks that you can't get past. You gain confidence in your ability to troubleshoot and come up with creative fixes. Plus, let us never underestimate our gardening community, because we are all the same. We are all caring for our nature, our flowers, our plants, our properties, whatever it is. We all love and are passionate about gardening and know that it feeds our souls. Because of that, if you have a problem, go seek help from a fellow gardener, whether it's at like a local arboretum, let's say. Maybe it's on YouTube. You find someone that you can ask a question to. How did you solve this problem? What can I do? Has anyone ever seen this before? I absolutely have come to adore this gardening community because of that. Because I feel like all of these things, conversations like this, experiences with different things in our gardens, these things are bringing us together more than ever as a community, and that is something I cherish now. With the state of the world being what it is and everything, we're united in this way, and it just makes me feel thankful. So there you have it, 5 ways gardening changes your life, unexpectedly or otherwise. I hope that you really enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I'm thankful for topics like these again, because I do feel like it brings us closer together as we share our thoughts and our stories about these things. So thank you for watching. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the ideas for the garden chats that we're having. It has just been overwhelmingly wonderful. I invite you to subscribe to my channel, and until next time, you guys, happy planting.